The most terrible ordeal
and dreaded experience of the entire California Immigrant Trail was this, the 40-mile desert here in what would become Nevada. Let's take a look at some of the physical reminders of this remarkable area, reminders of the tough people that were crossing the continent to get to the California gold fields starting in 1849.
started about 4 o'clock in the morning. About 10 miles out, the dead animal teams of 1849 and 50 were seen scattered here and there on the road. Very soon, however, they became more and more frequent, and in a little while filled the entire roadside, mostly oxen, with here and there a horse, and once in a while a mule. Wagons, wagon irons, ox chains, harnesses, rifles, and indeed all of the paraphernalia of an emigrant's outfit lay scattered along this notorious route, reminding one of the defeat of some great army. John Hawkins Clark, 1852.
The California Trail was the overland immigrant route between the Missouri River and the gold fields of California. Following the discovery of gold in Coloma, California in 1848, thousands and thousands of people got gold fever from people from all walks of life, and they started heading west. Most of them formed companies or groups and elected a captain and started equipping wagons and such. They could have purchased a ticket on a ship and sailed around Cape Horn for 6 months, but that was for the mostly well-heeled, and most of these people weren't that well-heeled, so they were on foot. The most terrible ordeal of this entire journey, and the most dreaded, according to according to every immigrant journal and diary, was the crossing of the 40-mile desert here in Nevada. The Immigrant Trail entered Nevada at the northeast corner and traveled 300 miles down the Humboldt River to the Carson Sink, which is just over there. The Carson Sink was just a massive area where the Humboldt River and the Carson River flowed into and never left. These folks had to follow water routes that had grass because their main mode of transportation was powered by animals, mule, cattle, oxen, and horses.
The route extended for approximately 2,000 miles, principally starting in St. Joseph or Independence, Missouri, and across the prairies, the Rocky Mountains, the deserts, and the Sierra Nevada mountain range. The trek took roughly 4 to 5 months to complete. It's well to remember that while they did bring wagons and livestock, they were essentially walking from Missouri to California.
The ox-powered wagons that they took across country were not the big lumbering Conestoga wagons that you see in the movies. They were actually lighter farm wagons, and they did have canvas tops. They were accustomed to these kind of wagons.
Separating the Humboldt River and the Truckee or Carson rivers was 40 miles of no potable water, no grass, deep sand, and oppressive heat. Many immigrants opted to make the crossing at night to escape the heat. Had this crossing happened earlier in their expedition, it wouldn't have been so bad, but by this point they were on the road 3, 4, 5 months, and the people and the animals were exhausted. The desert took a horrific toll on the oxen, horses, and mules, and many immigrants lost their lives before reaching the end of the 40-mile desert. Many first-hand accounts in the diaries describe a route littered with the bodies of dead or dying cattle, abandoned wagons, discarded water kegs, and other personal effects, and countless immigrant graves. A survey done in 1850 counted 1,061 mules dead, 5,000 horses, 3,750 cattle, and 953 immigrant graves. They estimated the property loss at $1 million. Mark Twain, who crossed it in 1861 in a stagecoach, wrote of the experience in his book, Roughing It. On the 19th day, we crossed the Great American Desert, 40 memorable miles of bottomless sand into which the coach wheels sunk from 6 inches to a foot. We worked our passage most of the way across. That is to say, we got out and walked. It was a dreary pull and a long and thirsty one, for we had no water. From one extremity of this desert to the other, the road was white with the bones of oxen and horses. It could hardly be an exaggeration to say that we could have walked the 40 miles and set our feet on a bone at every step. The desert was one prodigious graveyard, and the log chains, wagon tires, and rotting wrecks of vehicles were almost as thick as the bones. I think we saw log chains enough rusting there in the desert to reach across any state in the Union. Do not these relics suggest something of an idea of the fearful suffering and privation the early immigrants to California endured? This area is known as the Carson Sink, into which rivers flow and never reach the ocean. This natural structure in the background, the long smooth line, is the Humboldt Dike, which was formed by the wave action of ancient Lake Lahontan, and immigrants were warned in their guidebooks that this marked the beginning of the 40-mile desert. Shortly past this point, the trail split, and they had to choose the older Truckee River route, which traveled through the future site of Reno, or the newer Carson River route. Every immigrant had heard of the trials and tribulations of the Donner Party, which did head towards the Truckee River, so most immigrants took the Carson River route. In this episode, we'll visit locations on both routes. These wells, called the Humboldt or Double Wells, were dug by immigrants on the Carson River route in a vain search for drinkable water. This water turned out to be foul and was no good for man or the animals. There was later development here at these wells because there's no way the immigrants would have taken the time to line them with the wood that you see here. There's a well-preserved section of the original trail also leading away from the wells and off into the distance and the desert. At this remarkable location, which incidentally is my favorite on the 40-mile desert, you can still easily see the traces of struggling wagon wheels as they spread out to avoid the dust, and maybe grouchy neighbors. Past this location, the ground gets more and more sandy and the passage through becomes more difficult, and people started abandoning wagons, animals, and personal items in a desperate move to save themselves.
All right, guys, this is the kind of stuff that gives me goosebumps. And this kind of scene really kind of helps bring the immigrant trail experience to life, so to speak. This is the remains of a burned wagon. And you can tell that it is because the ground is covered with shards of metal, the things that weren't burned as well easily as the wood, of course. And most importantly, the barrel hoops from the discarded water barrels, which it looks like were just tossed onto the burning wreckage here. If you ever make it out here and find this kind of thing, please leave things as they are, so future generations can experience the same kind of things as we are today.
This is a really good example of what most likely is an immigrant grave, and please ignore the side-by-side tracks. They're modern and they're kind of screwing up the historic area. People! Anyway, we can tell that this is probably an immigrant grave because these rocks are out here all by their lonesome, and there's nothing else like them around. And they are in some kind of an arrangement, and the mound seems to be in an east-west direction, which was the order of the day back then. Can you imagine having to leave your loved ones out here in the barren desert? Your wife, your father, your brother, a hastily prepared grave, and then you have to get on your way towards water. This to me has the look of a small graveyard or maybe a family plot. It's hard to know for sure, but these rocks are not in a random grouping, if you know what I mean. This is kind of circular on the left. This is kind of circular on the right. And this other one kind of in an unnatural pattern. So hard to know for sure, but that's my best guess. This monument was erected in 1979, right on the trail, and it's inscribed with this journal entry by E.S. Ingalls in the August of 1850. Immigrant journals and diaries are the best way to re-experience what this was really like. And I'm so close to this subject, I get a little verklempt when I was rehearsing reading this, but I'm going to read it to you anyway. August 5th, 1850. Imagine to yourself a vast plain of sand and clay, the stinted sage, the salt lakes, cheating the thirsty traveler into the belief that water is near. Yes, water it is, but poison to the living thing that stops to drink. Burning wagons render still more the hideous solemn march. Dead horses line the road, and living ones may be constantly seen, lapping and rolling the empty water casks which have been cast away, for a drop of water to quench their burning thirst, or standing with drooping heads, waiting for death to relieve them of their tortures, or lying on the sand half buried, unable to rise, yet still trying. The sand hills are reached. Then comes a scene of confusion and dismay. Animal after animal drops down. Wagon after wagon is stopped. The strongest animals are taken out of the harness. The most important effects are taken out of the wagon and placed on their backs, and all hurry away, leaving behind wagons, property, and animals that, too weak to travel, lie and broil in the sun. The owners hurry on but with one object in view, that of reaching the Carson River before the boiling sun shall reduce them to the same condition. The desert. You must see it and feel it in an August day, when legions have crossed it before you, to realize it in all its horrors. But heaven save you from the experience. I took these images on film, black and white film, in 1997 on my first visit out to the 40-mile desert. These are the remains of some livestock or possibly horses or mules. Some vertebrae remained, but no other bone material really. And these are the remains of probably ox horns. Soda Lake is located near the end of the Carson River route near Fallon, Nevada, and it's a salt lake that's located in the cone of an extinct volcano. And several immigrant diaries recorded that they left the main trail and came to peek over the edge. The walls here are about 200 feet high. The Carson River route continues on past Soda Lake until it reaches the Carson River at what was named Ragtown, named by the immigrants due to the proliferation of clothing and other materials out drying on the trees and sagebrush. Exhausted people and animals regrouped, refreshed, and prepared to continue their journey. Their route from here would consist of the future site of Carson City, Carson Canyon, Hope Valley, and over the Sierra Nevada mountains. Okay, we've doubled back to explore some of the Truckee River route, which is the route that the Donner Party took. And this location here is known as the White Plains. Also of interest here is this old railroad bed of the Central Pacific, the Transcontinental Railroad, circa 1868. After our realignment and the rails were pulled, the old railroad bed served early automobiles as the east-west road until modern roads were constructed. Right on the side of Interstate 80, you can see these weird rock formations that were described in several immigrant diaries. This one from Edwin Bryant in 1846, a very early traveler. He said, "Some remarkable petrifications displayed themselves near the trail early this morning. They had all the appearance of petrified fungi, and many of them were of large dimensions." About halfway through the Truckee River route was found what was then known as the Boiling Springs, which is a geothermal area that contained so-so water, but once it was cooled, it was drinkable by man and animals. Today, this location is the site of a spice dehydration plant. When I was here 25 years ago, I was able to go through the gate and go see the remains of the springs, and I was denied the opportunity to go in the other day. They just say it's too dangerous now. But lucky us, I do have a photograph that I took from 1997, I believe, on film. The springs don't look anything like what the immigrants saw because there was later development. This place was called Brady's Hot Springs at one time and attracted tourists, but no longer. Who put this fence here? This wasn't here when I was here 25 years ago. This is the promontory turn of the Truckee River route.
After the hard pull off the main desert, they would come to this point. Hopefully you can see the emigrant marker behind me. There's a small mountain ridge that comes to an end right here. They would make a right turn right around the promontory, and they would see a miraculous sight, the line of cottonwoods along the Truckee River, and aquatic salvation. But it wasn't all fun and games getting from here to there. These are the Fernley swales, aptly named because they're right next to Fernley, Nevada. This is about halfway between that promontory turn that we visited earlier and the cool, soothing waters of the Truckee River. This was really hard going, lots of deep sand, and the wagon trains, or what was left of them, came right through here, tore up the dirt, tore up the ground, and over time that would all blow away, erode, and so there's actually, it's hard to see, I'm sure, from this angle, but there are these swales that are shaped like this, and they're still here today. This was the end of the 40-mile desert on the Truckee River route. This line of cottonwoods and the cool water of the Truckee River was a welcome sight to these mostly beat-up people and poor beat-up animals. The livestock that were left would sense that the water was coming, and they'd make a break for it, and that sometimes upset the wagons. So these poor exhausted people, after that hard pull in the desert, would rest here, bathe, and get their effects together for the next part of the journey, which was down the Truckee River Canyon, through the future site of Reno, the Truckee Meadows, and up and over the Sierra Nevada to California. All right, I'd be remiss if we didn't conclude this episode here at the 40-Mile Saloon, which, yes, was named after the 40-mile desert and is located right here in midtown Reno. And today I'm enjoying a Last Chance Pilsner by a local brewery called Imbibe. And if you're a Reno Sparks local, you'll recognize the little dude on there, Last Chance Joe. Used to be up at the Nugget in Sparks for decades. Hopefully you've got a greater understanding and appreciation for what went down in that desert 170 years ago. I'm as guilty as the next guy for taking modern conveniences for granted. I filmed this episode in 2 separate visits over 4 days, and the first time I just buzzed out on my motorcycle, and the second time we just took out our RV. It just doesn't seem fair. And let me address those immigrant trail markers that we saw several times in this show. Those were conceived by a loose-knit group of about 9 guys called the Nevada Immigrant Trail Marking Committee, and they fabricated those and installed them in the early 1970s on several portions of the trail, the Humboldt River portion, the Carson River portion, and the Truckee River portion. Today they're maintained by a group called Trails West, and I'll leave their website in the credits. I've greatly enjoyed the subject of the Overland Emigrant Trail, and I've studied and read about it since the mid-1990s. And I plan on doing more spots about the trail, possibly as it went through Reno and through our mountains. If you like that kind of content, please think about subscribing. Once I make and upload those, then you will know about it. And if you'll indulge me, I'd like to play you out with a song I wrote and recorded with my band Hot Rod Rebellion. It's entitled 1849. And I will include other photographs that I took on this recent trip, as well as other great photographs that I've taken over the past 20-25 years of other parts of the Emigrant Trail. So, as Harold Smith Sr. of Harold's Club always said, I'm with you. Cheers.